We had a very busy legislative year. What just ended was the first year of a 2-year legislative state session. And so during 2023, our club, right, there is the logo. And all right, I'll take it. Let's see what's going on. There we go. There we go. Wow. Okay. So our club took positions on a record 32 bills, and this involved a lot of work from our committee and the whole club to find these bills, vet them, discuss them, and vote to endorse them. And I'm happy to report that as of right now, 10 have been signed into law. 1 that we opposed did not advance. The bad news was that 4 that passed the legislature and that we endorsed were then vetoed by Governor Newsom. We'll give you details in just a moment. And the rest of our endorsed bills either failed or they could come back in January as what they call 2-year bills, which means they have a chance to be revived and possibly be passed next year. So, we're gonna move on. Okay, so the happy and exciting part of this is to talk about the bills that were signed into law and that we actively advocated for. 1 was AB 5, Safe and Supportive Schools. That was written by our own Assembly member, Rick Zuber, and it's provide training for teachers and staff on how to support LGBTQ students. We have AB 764, which added to the Fair Maps Act and local redistricting, enhancing that. AB 1386, this was on veterans housing. This bill allowed that if an affordable unit could not be filled by an extremely low income veteran, it could then be offered to a veteran who was just in a slightly higher income category. There's AB 1622, which, as far as I know, the first bill to amend Costa-Hawkins. This was also exciting because our own member, Anastasia Foster, helped write this bill along with Assembly Member Zuber. Anastasia, where are you? There she is. And what this does, this is for people with permanent disabilities. If they're living on an upper floor and a ground unit becomes available, they can move into that unit with no rent increase. So just because they move can increase their rent. Okay, so more on the good news side, the endorsed bill signed into law. We have SB 423. This is to address our housing crisis, and it streamlines approval of housing projects for cities that haven't met their goals. And it also removes a coastal exemption, which means that it can apply in Santa Monica as well. SB 434. This one was kind of interesting because it was championed by a high school student, Sam Cozzolino, and he was concerned about harassment on public transit. So this bill calls for a survey to be done and the data to be used to provide more safety for transit riders and to reduce harassment. So it's now a law, and he followed that bill all the way through to its final passage. SB 469 was written by our state senator, Ben Allen. And this is also something to improve affordable housing. I wanted to mention at this point that we took a survey of all of our members to see what are your most important concerns. And you listed affordable housing and homelessness, and that's why you'll see a number of housing bills that were included here. So this is one that was passed, and it basically removes an obstacle for building affordable housing. Certain state programs that are not subject to Constitution's Article 34. And then, as far as the bills that started in the Senate, we have SB 525, that's minimum wage for healthcare workers. It will be $21 an hour starting June 1st, going up to $25 an hour starting 2025. And considering all our healthcare workers went through and what they do, you know, during the pandemic and everything they do all the time, I think this is, you know, very reasonable compensation, you know, minimum for them. Okay, the last two bills, there we go, that were endorsed that are now law in California. This is a really important one. This was a constitutional amendment, ACA 5, marriage equality. We actually still had in our constitution an antiquated provision that called marriage only between a man and a woman. So this gets rid of that and expressly affirms that there's a fundamental right to marry. So that's now in our constitution. And the last one, SCR 17, artificial intelligence. This one honestly does not do a whole lot, but it is a step in the right direction. It's the first bill we have to regulate artificial intelligence, which we've been hearing so much about. That's been going by leaps and bounds, which could be very beneficial, but there are also many dangers involved with it. So this basically just says our intent to follow President Biden's vision for safe AI and the AI Bill of Rights. But we expect there's going to be more legislation coming forward on AI as the legislators get to know more about it. So that's all the good news. Now, for the things that made me mad. Oh, no. This is actually good. There was one bill brought to our attention by Dolly Sloan. Dolly, where are you? He's here somewhere. She went out. Okay. Anyway, she was very concerned about this bill that would allow law enforcement agencies to use facial recognition technology because this is very flawed technology and it often misidentifies people. And so allowing this, it was opposed by a long list of groups, including ACLU, as an invasion of privacy and something that would unfairly target minorities and other groups. And so we opposed this bill, and then I'm happy to report that this bill did not advance. And so it is dead. So this was kind of the bad news. There were a number of bills that were passed by the whole legislature, went through the whole legislative process. The Assembly, the Senate, passed by the legislature, got to the governor's desk, and he vetoed. There are a number of groups across the state that are upset about certain bills that he vetoed. And as far as the bills that we endorsed, there were 4 that we endorsed that he then vetoed. One was AB 309 on social housing. This was a pilot program devised by Assemblymember Lee to test social housing, which has been very successful in other countries, and to see if that could be a model for us to create more affordable housing. So that was vetoed. 8 1248 to set up independent risk redistricting commissions at cities and counties and school districts throughout the state. To me, I thought this was a no-brainer, and especially in light of the controversy that was raised in the LA City Council, the reporting of the council members talking about, you know, how they wanted to behind the scenes influence the drawing of districts that they would then benefit from. And this came to light, and it became very obvious that this should be done independently. But unfortunately, this law that would have those independent commissions was vetoed. I don't think it was based on the actual principles of it. There was some talk about that might cost some money to do this. So I'm really hoping in the future that we'll be able to do that. SB 403, this is a disappointment to many people. This was to ban discrimination based on caste. Basically, the governor said, well, that's already covered by the word ancestry. You know, we ban many types of discrimination in California. There are a number of different categories. Ancestry is one of them. He said that ancestry already covered it, but many people did feel that caste should be included as a separate category. However, that was vetoed. And then the last one that was vetoed was SB 665, was another plastics bill by Senator Ben Allen. This was a follow-up to a really landmark bill that Senator Allen had a few years ago which was a ban on all single-use plastics in California, but it only applied to existing plastics. So this would create a framework to study new plastics that are created to see if they would also come under this ban. However, that was also. So what's next? Looking ahead to 2024. As I mentioned, there were some bills that did not pass in 2023, but since we're going into the second year of a 2-year legislative cycle, some of those bills may come back, and two in particular that we know will be coming back and that will be have very high profiles and we're going to be working hard on. One is AB 1690. That's the latest single payer bill. It's also known as CalCare, that will provide single payer health care for everyone in California. It seems to many people who've been working on this for years, like a pipe dream. But we have really been, and I've been working with some of the coalition working on this. We have really been working hard on educating people, talking to labor unions, talking to legislators to build support for this when it's brought back in January. And there's some new people who have been elected who are more in favor of this. So there actually is a possibility this could pass that we would actually have to compare healthcare in California. So we're looking for advocacy on that. And there's also AB 83, which is known informally as the get money out of foreign money out of California elections. And we already have a law that prohibits foreign companies from contributing to our elections, but this would expand it to foreign influence businesses. So this is just part of a larger effort to get money out of politics. So we will be working on that. And then our committee is going to be looking for new bills that may be introduced in January that we would might want to support. And we're talking to legislators, we're talking to our coalition partners. And also we invite you, if you have bills, know of bills that will be either coming back or introduced in January that you would like us to consider, please contact our committee about that. And just to let you know, just in a brief recap of what do we do, after these bills are endorsed. And so we work on these all year round. We send letters to legislators, to committees before they vote on the bills. We call the legislators, and we're even able to remotely attend some of the hearings and voice our support because they have telephone testimony. So our club members have been very active. I think they've enjoyed being part of this process. And if you would like to be part of it, I put my email on there. Slide. There it is, action.isabel@gmail.com. You can email me, you want to know when the next meeting is, you can watch, you can be part of it, and you can suggest the bill yourself. So I've enjoyed telling you. Oh, and I do not want to forget, I wanted to thank the people who've been the most active on this committee. And these are the people who actually introduced the bill and then followed, we call them the point people, who followed the bills all the way through and did all the work that I'm talking about. So maybe when I say your names, you could stand up and take a little bow. Dennis Aoki, Leonora Cameron, and Paul, the 50s, for the president, the equipment, and all that's going on, and what's going on. Thank you to all of them. A lot of work, but it's very gratifying. So yeah, thank you, Michael Sola. And as I mentioned, we're looking ahead to next year. Michael actually has a bill that has come to his attention that he'd like to tell us about and for us to consider for endorsement tonight. So, Michael.
Michael. Thanks, everybody. I know we want to get to the DA debate, but this is a pretty important matter. We have 1.4 million households, not people, households in the state of California who are both low income and are paying more than 50% of their income for rent. And 500,000 of those households are here in LA County where we live. 70% of those are people who are extremely low income. These households are just one financial shock away from homelessness. So it's not surprising then that homelessness is increasing, because people are being driven into the street by rent burden faster than we can rehouse those who are already homeless. Thanks to Measure H, which most of us here voted for, the county's spending more money than ever to house people. It's getting people off the streets faster than ever, and yet the number's going up. It's because we're driving people into the streets through economics faster than we can solve the problem. Zillow found, they did a study that found that as rent burden increases, homelessness increases. The last pre-pandemic homelessness count here in LA County found that 40% of the unhoused in LA had fallen into homelessness for the first time that year due to economic reasons. The recent UCSF homelessness study, which I hope most of you have heard about, found that economic reasons are the most common reason California leaseholders become homeless. So what do we do about that? Well, our Assemblyman Rick Zaburz has suggested and put into the legislature bill AB 1431 that we start giving rent subsidy to these at-risk folks so they don't get driven into the street. And in order to do that, that way we'll be preventing homelessness before it starts. That's not only more compassionate, it's cost effective. It's a lot cheaper to keep people housed than it is to get people who are unhoused back into homelessness. And you would think that HUD should be doing this through the federal government, the Section 8 program, but the sad fact is that Congress has only funded that program such that 1 out of every 4 households that economically qualify get any assistance. So we're gonna have to do it ourselves. So this bill proposes that there be a rent subsidy pilot program run by HCD in up to 4 counties around the state, targeted at the most vulnerable renters. Those were both low income, as defined by being Medi-Cal eligible, and either a former foster youth, a senior, a disabled person, a person experiencing unemployment, among others. And then after 2 years, HCD is to return with a report on the results and recommendations, including potential establishment of a permanent program. And funding is by separate appropriation. So this is preventing, well, I guess I just said that, so I won't bother with that. Let me say this bill is being sponsored by the city of Santa Monica, and by the county of Los Angeles. And it's been supported virtually unanimously by the LA County Democratic Party. It's been recommended by our legislative committee unanimously. It's been recommended by our executive committee unanimously. And we're asking those folks who actually are members of the club and eligible to vote to support tonight this bill or anything similar to it. Not only that it be passed, but also that it be funded. And the reason we're bothering you about this now is that while our Assemblyman Rick Zaburz has spoken with the governor about this, and he has some sympathy for it, unless we build a groundswell, nothing's going to happen, just as it hasn't for the last 10, 15, 20 years, however long it's been. So I ask you tonight to please vote, if you're a member of the club, to support AB 1431 or a similar bill and support funding of it. And I guess I'll make that a motion. Is there a second to that? Yeah. Okay, it's been seconded. We want to conduct the voting.
Thank you for that presentation, Mike. And now we're going to take the vote, including those on Zoom. So if you are a member, if you're not a member of the club, we're going to get to the debate in just a second. If you are a member of the club, we have a motion made and seconded. If you support the motion to endorse this bill, please raise your hand. In person and of course, if you're on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand as well. Just a moment. So everybody on Zoom, please raise your hand to support the bill. Okay, so yeah, okay, let's everybody lower your hands now on Zoom. And now if you want to vote no, please raise your hand. And anybody on Zoom raise their hand for that, for no? Two people, okay, and any abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes and we endorse the bill. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you to Isabel for your great presentation. So we're about to start the DA debate. And so before we bring the candidates up, I just wanted to remind everybody that there's going to be many different views on stage tonight, as well as in the audience, person next to you perhaps. And I personally guarantee you that you are going to hear one of the candidates say something that you strongly disagree with at some point, probably a lot of it. That's okay. This club is not meant to be an echo chamber. We're here because we believe in fostering space for everyone. So what I'm asking you, even if you hear something that you strongly disagree with tonight, please be respectful. Don't shout out. Don't interrupt. Let the candidates speak, even when they say something you disagree with. We want to hear what everyone has to say. If you decide that you want to have a conversation with someone in the audience to debate an issue being discussed, take it out in the lobby, please, so it doesn't interrupt the debate. We have a lot of questions to get to tonight, and we want to hear from the candidates, and with respect, not you. So, just want to review what the debate rules are. All of the candidates have been told these rules in advance. For each question, the candidates will each get 1 minute to respond. If a candidate's name is invoked, they will get 30 seconds to respond to that. Our recording secretary, Natalia Zernitskaya, right here, our very own Miss Minutes. Any Loki fans? We'll be keeping time. And at the end of the minute, she will say, "Time's up." We received a lot of questions from everybody in advance, hundreds of questions. And our executive committee put together 11 questions tonight based on the topics that we got the most questions about. These are formatted in a way so that every candidate can answer equally. We're not going to ask any question or directed at just one of the candidates. And I want to point out, this is a Democratic club, so only the 8 registered Democrats in the field were invited to participate. Another candidate, Nathan Hoffman, who's a registered no party preference, asked to participate this afternoon, but he's ineligible to participate because we have a Democratic Party bylaws and Democratic club bylaws. And the purpose of this event is for the Santa Monica Democratic Club to make its decision on which candidate we're going to endorse. And both our club and the county bylaws are clear that we can only endorse registered Democratic candidates. So that's why Mr. Hoffman was not invited to participate. Finally, reminder to the candidates, we have 150 people in this room, but we have 313 and counting on Zoom. So be sure that you use the microphone when you speak, or else the people at home probably won't be able to hear you. So without further ado, let's please welcome our 8 Democratic candidates for Los Angeles County District Attorney in alphabetical order. Judge Deborah Archuleta. Jackson Lansford. The incumbent PA George Gaston. Jonathan Tyler. Yeah. Craig Mitchell. And Alex Sidal. You can move the chairs apart from each other if you don't have the person next to you. Okay, so we're going to start with opening statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute. And we'll start with Mr. Snell. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Sidal, and I am a deputy district attorney, and I represent a new generation of prosecutors. I represent a generation that does not want to go back to the death penalty. But I also represent a generation that rejects the failed policies of Mr. Gascon. We see the failure of his policies every day. We see them on the streets. We see them in the courtroom. There is a way of reforming our system, of making it better, but also keeping you safe. Mr. Gascon has failed in that promise that he gave you 3 years ago. This is why I'm running for district attorney. This is why I believe I am the person that understands the politics of this county, this state, how to get things done. I am an accomplished prosecutor. I'm a veteran prosecutor. I've tried some of the most difficult cases. And as a union leader, I've been able to understand how this office functions, where the resources are, where they should be allocated, so that we can actually accomplish the goals of making sure that we do reform, but we keep people safe.
My name is Maria Ramirez, and I am a deputy district attorney in the district attorney's office for the past 33 years. I joined the office 33 years ago because I saw injustices where I grew up. My neighborhood was riddled with gang violence, and I wanted to do something about it. And so in 33 years of my career, I was a trial attorney and worked my way up to senior management. And I am running for district attorney today because, again, I see injustices happening in the last 3 years, and I want to do something about it again. I am the only candidate that you will hear from up here today that has been a trial lawyer in our office, working directly with victims of crime and the community, and have also worked my way up into the senior management of our office, running the largest local prosecutorial office in the nation. And it is going to take that kind of experience, that kind of heart, to be able to do something about the crime that we see today. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Craig Mitchell. I'm a lifelong Democrat. And I've always been proud of this party because it has made a commitment, a longstanding commitment to the people of Los Angeles, based on 2 fundamental principles. Number 1, to make sure that people felt safe in their homes and communities, and that dangerous criminals were removed from the street. I believe the current administration has violated that commitment to the people of Los Angeles, and that is why I'm running. You're going to hear tonight us talk about a lot of issues. 2 of the critical issues facing Los Angeles County: homelessness and crime. 90% of the chronically homeless, a recent study found, suffer from addiction. You will learn tonight that there is one candidate here who has, for the last 12 years, worked on Skid Row, worked with those people suffering from addiction, and moved them into long-term sobriety. I'm going to talk more about that tonight. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening, Santa Monica Democrats. My name is John McKinney, and I've worked for you for the past quarter of a century. For the past 25 years, I've been a deputy district attorney. I've emerged as a leader in the DA's office, prosecuting all manner of crime. I spent 6 years in the hardcore gang unit, 10 years in the elite major crimes division, prosecuting high-profile cases, including most recently the killer of Nipsey Hussle. Before becoming a prosecutor, I myself grew up in an inner city, high-crime, low-income neighborhood. I lost both my parents by the time I was in kindergarten, was raised by my eldest sister during the crack cocaine epidemic. It is then and there that I learned about pain and suffering and drug addiction and criminality. I took those lifelong lessons with me as I worked my way through college and law school, and for the past 25 years representing you fairly, ethically, and legally in the criminal justice system. I'm honored to be here tonight, would love to earn your support.
Good evening, my name is Jonathan Atami, and I'm running to be district attorney to prioritize public safety. Period. I'm running for the safety of my children who are right here in this audience today. I'm running for the safety of all of your children. I'm running for the safety of victims and survivors and surviving family members who are here today. I see you, I hear you, you do matter. We shouldn't have kids who are beat up at McDonald's. We shouldn't have women who are walking on the street during lunch and sexually assaulted. We shouldn't have people out here in Santa Monica who are attacked on Halloween night and robbed of their purses. We shouldn't have kids who are poisoned by fentanyl. I'm running for them. I'm also running for the police officers and deputies, the individuals who are risking their lives every day for all of you, are under attack every day as a result of what's going on out here in Los Angeles. So let me talk a little about Santa Monica. You shouldn't be afraid to walk down the street or go to the beach or go to the promenade. We shouldn't have business owners spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on security. So I'm running for the safety of all of you here today. Thank you.
Good evening. You know, as Democrats, we're coming up to a period of time where fake news has dominated the dialogue. You know, my opponents have a right to oppose me, and we're all big boys here and big girls, and I can handle that. But we as Democrats owe an obligation to our community to be the guardians of the truth. This county supported me 3 years ago, and we as Democrats joined hands and embarked on a very ambitious reform agenda, and we have made a difference. Violent crime is down, we're addressing property crime aggressively, we're bringing trauma-informed care to our victims, but we also have taken 30 people out of death row and put them in life without the possibility of parole. From sentences that were keeping them in prison unnecessarily. We should not go back.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Chemerinsky. I'm a former federal prosecutor, and I serve as chief of the Violent and Organized Crime Section at the United States Attorney's Office. It's great to be here with you all tonight. Santa Monica is an important area to me, an area I spent a ton of time in growing up. You'll also hear I'm a lifelong Democrat. While in law school, I worked for then Senator Joe Biden. I also worked for the Obama campaign to help him get elected. It's really great to talk to you tonight about the values that I have and that hopefully we all share. You'll hear that while I've worked with law enforcement in the county, I did so successfully. I worked with pretty much every law enforcement agency in the county and built strong partnerships. I worked on pretty much every type of violent crime case there is as a federal prosecutor. And I'm proud of the work I did as a prosecutor to keep our community safe and to go after the worst of the worst. I launched this campaign for district attorney with 3 major priorities. The first is public safety. It's the #1 priority of the district attorney to prosecute crime and keep people safe. The second is criminal justice reform. And the third is new leadership and accountability for the district attorney's office. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Judge Deborah Archuleta. The question I have for you tonight is, are we safer now than we were 3 years ago before the current district attorney took the oath of office? Ever since that date on December the 9th, whatever 3 years ago it was, 2020, we have been in a downward spiral because of his policies. My journey started when I was 19 years old. I was the victim of domestic violence. I had to have brain surgery. When I came out of that, I made a commitment that I would start to work with victims of violent crime. That was part of my journey. I worked my way as a legal secretary through Fullerton College. I got a degree from the University of California, Irvine in economics, and I worked as a legal secretary at night and on the weekends. I started in 1989 as a law clerk in the district attorney's office, and I worked my way to top management of trials that I did. I tried over 130 jury trials. I went to parole board hearings around the state to keep serious violent criminals locked up. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And we'll start the questions. We'll alternate who starts. So Ms. Ramirez will get the first answer. But first, we're going to just ask a couple of yes or no questions. So just raise your hand. Has anyone on the stage ever been registered as a Republican? Okay, and those who are raising your hand, if you just want to say, that since we know everyone's now a Democrat, what year you changed to become a Democrat?
I used to work for,
Just like the year.
that would have been 2004.
Okay, thanks. Who's next?
From 1989 to 2012, I was a Democrat. From 2012 to 2016, I was a Republican, and from 2016 to the present, I've been a Democrat.
Thank you.
He became a Democrat in 2010.
Thank you.
I became a Republican when Monica Lewinsky was victimized, so I was like a few years and then I switched back. I don't remember what the year was.
Okay, thank you. And on a related note, has anyone on the stage ever been registered by another party other than Democrat or Republican? Okay.
When I was elected judge in 2016, I registered to an independent because I felt as a judge, I couldn't have a party alliance. And then I switched, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
Great, thanks so much. And now we're going to bring up to ask the next question, the chair of Santa Monica's Public Safety Oversight and Reform Commission, a member of the Democratic National Committee, the chair of the Disabilities Commission for the State Democratic Party, and possibly the next Political Action Committee chair of the Santa Monica Democratic Club, Eric Devermont.
Thank you, everyone. Very simple question. Thank you all for being here. Some of you know, some of you have a chair to front. What should a district attorney prioritize? Reform or punishment?
The district attorney should prioritize public safety and then reform, not punishment. There has to be accountability. That is important, and that is why what is happening right now in LA County is happening, because there is no accountability. As a district attorney, your primary responsibility is to protect the community from crime. And we cannot do that unless we follow the laws of this state, and that is important. We can only build reform that works when we have a base that protects our community. So we have, as district attorney, a responsibility to public safety first, and then to build upon that with reform measures that work, that are thoughtful, and that have measures of success. So that's. Thank you.
Public safety is always priority number one. And I may distinguish myself from some of the other people on this stage tonight. But I don't perceive punishment necessarily as a dirty word. I work on Skid Row. I work with the formerly incarcerated. And runner after runner who has spent time in prison, they all tell me the same thing. They say, Judge, I hated prison. I was scared in prison. Shortly after they communicate that to me, they say, but Judge, I would not have changed my life if I hadn't taken that time out. For dangerous criminals, we need a place where they can go and be reformed. When you talk about reform, I'm part of a program that has brought Pitzer College into the state prisons so that when inmates, thank you very much.
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. It's a great question, but it presents a false choice. We don't have to choose between reform or punishment. Punishment is often an important element of reform behavior. And another word about criminal justice reform, those are just words. You hear people say, I'm for criminal justice reform. Let me tell you something about our criminal justice system. It is in a constant state of change. The criminal laws in California have never been stagnant. We reform every year and throughout the year through laws, ballot measures, and court decisions. We are constantly refining things and trying to get to that level of justice that makes everyone feel comfortable. So I'm for both reform when it makes sense and punishment when it makes sense on a case-by-case basis. No blanket policies like those introduced by the current district attorney on his first day in office. Thank you.
Public safety is the #1 priority of the district attorney. If you're committing smash and grab burglaries, follow home robberies, if you're poisoning children with fentanyl, if you're intentionally torturing and murdering a child, if you're sexually abusing somebody out on the streets or sexually battering that person, you should be held accountable and responsible for your crimes. And that isn't happening during the last 3 years of the district attorney. But also with that, you need a prosecutor who has a heart, who is empathetic, who wants to help people if you can, who wants to try to reform people if you can, who wants to try to rehabilitate people if you can. But also, there is punishment. If you torture a child to death, there has to be punishment. If you break into someone's house and sexually assault somebody and murder them, there has to be punishment. If you sexually molest a child, there has to be punishment. That is part of our society. So you need to have all three, but the #1 of the DA is to make sure all of you are safe and to make sure if somebody commits a crime, they're prosecuted for it and they're held accountable and responsible for that. Then you can have rehabilitation if that can happen. Thank you so much.
We hear people talking today as if reform and safety are two different things. The reality is that we have been in a system that has had very rigid policies. This county incarcerated more people per capita than any other county in the state. And yet our recidivism rate was about 70%. Think about it. These are people coming out of prison, going back, and harming our community. The reality is that having thoughtful policies that hold people accountable, as we have, sending people to prison when they need to be locked up, but recognizing that prison cannot be the only answer, is what public safety is all about. It is not going back to the days of mass incarceration. It's not going back to the days of the death penalty. It's not going back to the days of overly discriminating against African American and other communities. It's about intervention to make sure that people do not continue to harm our community.
Thank you. I think it's a really important question. But to be clear, the #1 priority of the district attorney has to be public safety. The district attorney is entrusted to prosecute crime, to work with law enforcement, to hold people accountable every single day. That has to be the number one priority. But I also believe that there's a lot of room for criminal justice reform. I think our system has done a lot wrong in the past. Mass incarceration simply does not work. Warehousing people is not the solution. And we need to make sure that while there's a lot of frustration with crime right now, and I share those frustrations, we don't go back to the tough on crime policies of the 90s that did not serve us well. I think there's a way to do both. To address crime, hold people accountable, prosecute crime, work with law enforcement in partnership, but also have criminal justice reform. It requires a careful look, a careful tailoring of policies to make sure we do it right. Hold people accountable, but do it fairly every single day. That's what I would deliver.
As an elected government official myself, I raised my right hand and took an oath to uphold the laws of the state of California as well as the Constitution. We can't pick and choose which laws we choose to uphold based on our personal ideology. We need intervention, interdiction, along with accountability. I agree with Mr. McKinney, it's not a choice of reform or punishment. It's interdiction, it's intervention. We have many fine law enforcement officers here tonight. There is intervention and opportunities available to work with people out on the streets. There's care courts coming in. We've got drug courts. We have veterans courts. We have a variety of courts available for people with special needs and services, so we can be responsive as the district attorney to ensure their safety and the safety of the community by specially tailoring to their needs, to their issues that they are suffering from, but they can also be held accountable and held responsible so that everyday citizens are not subject to being victims of violent crime.
But the primary job of the DA is to do justice. That is our goal. That is what we're supposed to always be aiming for. It is not to just punish, it is not just a reform, but it is to make sure that the reform that we do actually makes sense. That the punishments actually fit the crime. There are times when we have to lower punishment, that we have to recall sentences. In fact, I had a case a few years ago where a man murdered someone when he was younger. We added a gun allegation, that gun allegation was proven. What happened was, he had reformed, he had changed, he had evolved. With that recognition, I recalled the gun enhancement years later after he was doing well in state prison and asked the judge to dismiss that gun enhancement. That man will now have parole in 2025 after committing a murder. Why? Because he changed, because he reformed. The one thing I do think that we have to understand.
Thank you. And now we'll start with Judge Mitchell. In the last 4 years, or 3 years of Mr. Gascon's term, has Los Angeles County become more or less safe? And what statistics would you use to back that up?
Los Angeles has become less safe over the last 3 years. Seen it play out in my courtroom for the last 3 years. I have, within 3 weeks of the current administration coming into office, I had a gentleman who had been stabbed 13 times. He came into my courtroom and he said, Judge Mitchell, why is this person receiving so little punishment? I almost died. There was no great bodily injury enhancement. He said, why not? There was no personal use of a deadly weapon allegation. When you stab someone 13 times, what crime has been committed? Everybody knows what crime that is. It's attempted murder. What did this current district attorney's office impose? Assault. This is just wrong. This is why Los Angeles.
Violent crime is up. You can see it You can hear it, you can feel it, and if you trust statistics, they say it too.
No, they don't.
In Mr. Gascon's first full year as DA, homicides hit a 15-year high in Los Angeles County. They are still, to this day, higher than they were before he took office. That's the same with shootings. That's the same with property crimes, especially car burglaries, car thefts, catalytic converters, Mr. Gascon. The retail industry lost $112 billion, 36% of which from organized retail theft. And by the way, the district attorney forgot to file for $2 million from the state, which could have hired 3 senior prosecutors to handle retail theft crime. So yes, crime is up. That's why you're all here tonight. That's why you're looking at the district attorney's race 5 months in advance.
Let's talk about statistics. Hate crimes are up over 100% over the last year. And he was the first person who took office who got rid of hate crimes the day he took office. Hate crimes against the Jewish community are up 27.6%. Retail theft crimes are up 128%, and it's been reported in all sorts of newspapers. Commercial burglaries are up, commercial thefts are up, retail burglaries are up. Mr. Gascon knows, and he did say this, all property crime has increased during the last 3 years. People have had enough of these smash and grab burglaries. People have had enough of these organized retail theft. And he also knows during the first 2 years he was in office, violent crime rose. And the problem with that is violent crimes dipped a little bit during this year, about 1 to 2%. But let me tell you something, the police officers are demoralized because they won't file any of their cases. So many people don't get their cases reported. So many people report crimes and they don't get actually filed. And so statistics don't tell the actual thing. People.
We're almost saying that we're a Republican debate. Let's call it for what it is. Okay. During the pandemic, crime went up nationally, but proportionally actually went up less in our community than many surrounding communities where district attorneys operate the same way that the folks behind me have operated for years.
Yeah.
Homicides have started to go down in 2022 and 2023, and they have gone down nationwide, but in our community, they have gone down at a higher rate.
Yep.
The reality is that we went through 3 years of a pandemic, and by the way, crime was going up in 2020 before I became the district attorney. And on December 7th and on December 8th, I was being blamed for the crime increase of 2020, and it has never stopped.
Right.
We must change the crimes.
What the crime statistics show is that crime is still up compared to pre-pandemic levels across all court categories of violent crime. We're up also in property crimes and in hate crimes. It's also really important to note, I see this every day when I talk to individuals and groups, that people right now don't feel safe. My wife, when I talk to her, she doesn't feel safe. And that's a real problem. I think people need to feel confident that the law is working for them, that the law is being applied fairly and justly, but it's being applied and people are being held accountable. And we've lost that sense of confidence right now. And I think that goes back to the lack of confidence in our district attorney. As district attorney on day one, I would work to instill confidence, to make sure that people know the law is being applied, and that people are being held accountable. So I think people need to feel safe in our city.
Well, I'm flattered because when I was at the ALADS debate, I asked everybody, do you feel safer now than you did 3 years ago? And now it's one of the questions. Do people feel safer now than they did 3 years ago when Mr. Gasco took helm of the district attorney's office? They do not. And whether he wants to stand up here and argue that crime statistics are down, that might be because he has over 13,000 cases sitting on his desk that have not yet been filed. Feel safer? Would I have felt safer if I was that woman walking in Long Beach in broad daylight that was sexually assaulted and he wanted to file misdemeanor charges on her? How would you feel if that was your mother, your sister, your daughter? I know how I would feel, and that's why we are all up here tonight, and you are out here today, and I've stepped down from the bench to step up for you.
So here's the deal. For the past 5 years, crime in California has been going up, both property crime and violent crime. And you can't blame the district attorney for every rise in crime. But what you can say is he doesn't have a solution. I have a real solution in how to deal with violent crime in Los Angeles County. It involves targeting the worst offenders, the drivers of crime. When we look at crime, we have to think about what crime really means. 70% of crime occurs in 5% of our neighborhoods. They're the ones who get victimized. They're the ones who need our voice. And they need a district attorney who's not going to just say, well, the stats show that from last year, they're down. The trend is up. We are becoming unsafe. Compared to the rest of the country, there has been a remarkable shift in terms of where the trajectory of crime is going. And it's not in the right way. And we need a DA who understands that and will make you safer.
I want to thank all my colleagues here today, the candidates, for telling you about the statistics, but I wanted to talk about how you feel. And when you talk to your neighbors, how they feel. That's what we're talking about. Statistics are well and good and they inform us about the steps we must take to protect the community. But how do you feel? And the reason that you don't feel safe today is because the current district attorney refuses to prosecute crimes, refuses to use the enhancement that the legislature has given us to prosecute crimes. He refuses to prosecute misdemeanors. So is it any wonder that we don't feel safe today? Sure, it is not all his fault, but he certainly is a major factor in why we do not feel safe today. And as district attorney, I will first of all enforce the laws and use the laws that the legislature has given us to protect all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So we're gonna bring Derek back up for the next question. But to the candidates, I just wanted to remind everybody that if someone's name is invoked, you have the opportunity to respond immediately for 30 seconds. So I'm not gonna force anybody to take that opportunity, but obviously, Mr. Gasco, your name was mentioned a few times. So just going forward, and not for that question, but just going.
Multiply 30 seconds.
So just going forward, if you want to, you can take the opportunity, but I'm not required for that.
In what circumstances, no pun intended, would you find it appropriate to seek the death penalty?
Thank you for your question. The law tells us the circumstances in which the death penalty is appropriate. Now, we live in California where we haven't had an execution since the mid-2000s. We have a moratorium on the death penalty and the governor has taken down death row. Still, the death penalty is the law. And if you are vying to be the district attorney of Los Angeles County, I would hope that you would have fidelity to the law and agree to uphold the law. And if you don't have the personal constitution to uphold the people's laws, then you shouldn't be running for district attorney. First degree murders, when a special circumstance is true, and the aggravating factors surrounding the murder so far outweigh any circumstances and mitigation that a jury, 1 through 12, say in unison, death is appropriate. That's when we seek the death penalty.
Capital punishment was passed by the people of the state of California in 2012. It was passed again by the people of the state of California in 2016. It is the law here in the state of California. Gabriel Fernandez is brutally tortured and murdered. There is no way I am going to say that the jury did not make the right decision when they got presented all of the evidence in that case. That's how capital punishment cases work. If a police officer is sitting in his car and is brutally assassinated by somebody, we should at least consider the law in those type of cases. It doesn't mean that everybody in those cases is going to finally determine to be capital punishment, but it should be a consideration that the DA looks at. If children are intentionally tortured and murdered, if somebody goes into a school and kills multiple children, shouldn't the ultimate punishment be a consideration for the district attorney? That is justice, and that is the law in California.
You know, Maurice Hastings was recently exonerated. This is a black man that spent 47 years in prison as a result of the prosecution in LA County. This office filed the death penalty twice. And finally, the death penalty was overturned and he was given life without the possibility of parole. For 20 years, he tried to have the DNA tested because he was found guilty of rape and murder. When I first came to office, I was told not to allow the DNA to be tested because we must protect the conviction. I refused to do that, and we tested the DNA. Not only was Maurice Hastings factually innocent, but the person that murdered and raped the victim and raped another woman later was walking free around the streets because of the wrongful conviction. The death penalty doesn't work. The death penalty has been in almost every state on the United States in California because it is wrong. It doesn't make us any safer.
As a federal prosecutor and chief of the violent and organized crime section of the United States Attorney's Office, I have to grapple with death penalty decisions. I have to talk to victims' families about death penalty decisions. And I know the trauma they feel and the pain they suffer. Ultimately, I don't believe the death penalty for a number of reasons. And let me go through a few of them. First, I don't believe the death penalty is any deterrent whatsoever. There's absolutely no evidence that the death penalty deters any type of crime. Second, the death penalty has been disproportionately applied to minorities and underserved communities. I think that's deeply problematic. And third, the American Medical Association now bars its doctors from participating in executions. That means that you'd be faced with executions, whether lethal injections or the electric chair, in which you have no doctors assisting and no participation. I think it's just wrong, and I would not apply the death penalty.
The death penalty reflects the will of the voters, and as the district attorney of Los Angeles, you must carry out the law whether you ideologically agree with it or not. In the Special Circumstances Committee, I've been before that committee. I've had to take cases where a tribunal of the most experienced and wise district attorneys in the office with a variety of opinions sit around a big conference room. And you have to present your cases to why you think it might be death appropriate or whether it won't be. Then ultimately, it's the will of the jury. It's the will of the people. It's the will of you folks that sit on juries that make that decision. And to automatically tie the hands of the district attorney by saying, I don't believe in that, you have no business running for this office. And you tell them, Lincoln Boomer, who was sitting in his car in patrol, shot in the head. I was at that funeral, and I will tell you, when I had to see the current TA stand up there and say, I'm going for the most severe penalty and it will not bring him back. What a shame and an embarrassment for the district attorney.
So I had the privilege and honor of prosecuting the murder of Officer Paul Burnett, who was murdered in 1983. Both of his murderers were sentenced to death. You know what's interesting? When we redid the trial, the co-defendant, who's been on death row since 1985, testified. What does that tell you? It doesn't work. It is a fallacy. There is no death penalty. There's literally no way to actually execute someone in California. It brings people, victims, false hope. And I'm not going to engage in that type of stuff. I will always fight for victims. I will always fight for the right thing to happen. But I'm also not going to fight for an institution that is not ever going to be used in the state of California.
The death penalty is one of those hot button issues, isn't it? Because we all have very strong feelings about the death penalty because of our own personal beliefs. But as district attorney, we are bound to follow the law. And even if it is symbolic at this point, because death executions do not happen in California, it is still the law by the power of the people of the state of California. And we must follow that law. The important thing for the district attorney is to have a fair process of analysis for those cases that qualify for the death penalty, so that we are not imposing it symbolically on every case that has a special circumstance allegation. It is only in the worst cases, in the child torture cases, in the police officer who was executed. Those cases are the ones that matter.
My take on this question is a little different than what I've heard so far. Are there certain individuals that I don't lose a lot of sleep over, given the fact that they were executed? What Timothy McVeigh did in Oklahoma City, I lose no sleep over what happened to Timothy McVeigh. Okay, but having said that, I also understand the literally millions of dollars that we spend in the appellate process once a death sentence comes down. And in an era of limited resources, we could take those billions of dollars and redirect them to services for victims of crime and to actually address the cause of crime. And so in terms of me adhering to the law, I'll do that. But in the vast majority of cases, life without the possibility of parole, stop this nonsense appellate process that goes on forever, spend the money where it can help people.
Okay, now for our next question. Already spoke tonight, our VP of Legislation and also a delegate to the State Democratic Party, Isabel Story.
Given the recent implementation of zero bail policy in LA County, which has stirred controversy and legal challenges, what do you see as the purpose of cash bail?
So when they instituted the zero bail policy in the county, they also said things such as elder abuse, child abuse, sexual battery, organized retail theft, conspiracy. Those type of cases either fell under zero bail or either fell under magistrate review. We have so many individuals who are committing crimes, coming back, committing another crime, coming back, and committing another crime. And so it's unfair. In addition to that, we do have money bail. For all serious felonies and for all violent felonies, there is money bail. And so the issue is this: if you really want a fair bail system and also a system that provides public safety, which should be the number one thing that we all care about, have everybody appear before a judge within 48 hours. Have a judge decide if somebody should be released. Have a judge hear exactly what's going on. Have a judge hear if somebody's a repeat offender. Have a judge hear if there's a victim who's vulnerable, who doesn't want this person to be released. We should never release individuals who are committing child abuse or elder abuse or sexual battery. Thank you.
How much money you have in your bank account doesn't say how safe or unsafe you are. We have had many people in this county that have been released from bail. As a matter of fact, just today, as I was coming here, I was watching Channel 5. And there's an individual has been involved in 2 foul home robberies. He posted cash bail each time. He was released before he came in front of my office and he went back to commit other crimes. We had an individual that murdered 3 people recently. He was given a $4 million bail and he was ready to post bail. And we opposed it and he was then held without bail. On the other hand, we have poor people that often stay in custody because they cannot afford to pay bail, even though they may not be dangerous for society. We need to have a system where people are immediately evaluated. And if the system assesses that they're at risk, they should be held back regardless of whether they have money to pay bail or not. And if they're not unsafe, they should be released to be able to handle the case.
On the federal side, what we do is every defendant who's charged with a crime is brought before a judge. And the judge makes the individualized assessment should the defendant be released, held in custody, or given bond. It's a system that works really well. Now, the presiding judge of the Superior Court of Los Angeles, Samantha Jessner, is working to implement a similar system. I think the new bail reform system implemented by the presiding judge has a lot of potential. I think it will need to be adjusted. But I think one of the key changes that she's implemented is that whether someone's released or detained does not depend on their wealth. I think the old bail schedule that we had was deeply problematic. It created a system in which rich people could pay to bail out while poor people couldn't and were held in custody. Ultimately, what should guide custody decisions in detention pre-trial is the dangerousness. Danger should be the basis in which we hold people and not their wealth. And so I support bail reform strongly.
When I was a DA, I asked for reasonable bail, and when I was a judge in the criminal court, I imposed reasonable bail, and I looked at a variety of factors. Was a weapon in use during the commission of the crime? Was it a particularly vulnerable victim? Did the suspect have a lengthy rap sheet? We're all hearing about the revolving door going on where people are not posting bail, because I know for a fact that the district attorney's office has now had a policy put in place, one of the many bad blanket policies. They're not allowed to go into court now and advocate and ask for bail, especially on serious and violent crimes. So what happens is they don't look at the prior history. Was a weapon used? How are they on probation? Are they on parole? Do they make their court appearances? What kind of collateral can they put? No one ever looks to see how rich or how poor a defendant is when they impose bail. They look at the rap sheet. They look at the aliases. They look at trying to ensure with the public safety issue, because that is the purpose for bail. It's not to marginalize the poor. It's not to prop up the rich. It's to ensure public safety. That's the reason for bail.
You know, I understand that the judge works in defense court and she's not aware of what happens in criminal court. The reality is, bail on dangerous cases, and we also seek preventative detention and no bail in many cases. When cases come in front of us, our deputies are seeking bail when it is appropriate, and we're following the law. Again, I think it's important to recognize what is happening and what is not happening. You're hearing a lot of this information here today, and I urge you to do your own fact check.
The current district attorney, I tried over 130 juries. I held crime victims' hands. I sent the suspect and the defendants off to prison. I've gone to San Quentin and Vacaville and Soledad because he doesn't believe in that. I've been in a courtroom, and don't you dare underestimate my experience. 28 years in the district attorney's office, 3 years in the criminal courts, and 3.5 years serving in dependency at ground zero of everything he is doing wrong. So don't demean my professional reputation.
For us who actually work in the state system and understand what happens in the state court, bail is actually a constitutional right provided by the state constitution. You have to ask for bail. If you don't ask for bail, that person gets released. And that is what's happening under the current district attorney. He is not asking for bail on certain types of offenses. And let me give you one good example. Felon with possession of a firearm. That offense under George Gascon's policies was not, bail was not asked for. When you violate your conditions of being released, he told us not to ask for bail enhancements or sentencing enhancements. It is a ludicrous way of conducting business. You have to have experience in this office to understand how it functions. You have to have experience in the courtroom to understand how it works. And there are people on the stage who have neither.
The idea behind zero cash bail is an admirable one. In other words, we don't want people sitting in jail just because they cannot afford the bail and nothing else. A good bail system should be based on a complete review of the defendant, of the charges, of the criminal history, and the current zero bail system, while admirable, is very much flawed because it looks at just the charge. So you have somebody committing a grand theft auto who has committed 10 prior grand theft autos, and it doesn't matter because he's going to get zero bail just because it's based on the charge. Just like they forgot to include certain exceptions. Child abduction for one. Child abduction is one where you go to the magistrate. However, the magistrate does not have any power to set bail. They can only set conditions of release. And this could be a child abduction where the person still has a child outstanding.
No cash bail system is well intentioned. The jury is out as to whether or not it is going to increase crime in our community. But I'm very uncomfortable with the proposition, and I know law enforcement is as well. If they arrive at the scene of a commercial burglary, they see the person coming out of the store with the stolen items. Does it make any sense not to take that person into custody? In my opinion, it does not. What needs to happen, we need to get it right. What needs to happen is we need to arrest people and adhere to the 48-hour rule. Once you get arrested, you go in front of the judge. The judge just, as many of my colleagues have said, you just don't look at the crime, you look at their criminal history. I absolutely agree. If a person has stolen cars 10 times, this is not a person to be released to do it an 11th time.
I told you all I grew up in a high crime environment where a lot of my friends were small town hustlers. I may be the only person on this stage who actually helped bail somebody out of jail as a young man. I've got to tell you, I believe that the time for bail has come and gone. It is anachronistic. We need to move off of a bail system and move to a risk assessment system. Governor Jerry Brown tried to move us in that direction in 2018 with SB 10. It went to all of us voters, it's Prop 25. But the Public Defenders Association, the ACLU, and the bail industry all joined forces to defeat it. What we are really concerned about in deciding whether people should stay in custody or be released is what kind of a risk do they pose to the community or a particular victim in the community or flight. That should be done with the help of risk assessment tools to help guide a judge and make that decision. Shouldn't matter how much money you got. who your father is, who your mother is. If you are a risk, you stay in. And if you are not, you get to get out and go on with your life and fight your case unless something significant changes. That's where we need to be.
Okay, so next question is, do you find value in diversionary programs for defendants who are mentally ill?
I do. One of the problems that we've had for many years is we have criminalized mental health. And we're paying the price for that. In our jail today, about 40% of the people that are in have severe mental health problems. And they are going in and out, and they're continuing to harm themselves and harm the rest of us. We see them on our streets very often, and sometimes, unfortunately, they end up committing very serious crimes because they're mentally ill. We need to have a better system of providing diversion for those that are mentally ill. Those that are dangerous, they need to be in a secure facility. Those that are not as dangerous, they need to be under treatment. And one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working very hard with our board of supervisors to increase the number of secure mental health beds, as well as other facilities in order to deal with mental health. We have a mental health epidemic, and it's not going away until we address it.
I think diversionary programs are great when appropriate. I think that diversionary programs can set people in the right direction, the right path. They can create incentives for people to seek treatment. They can create incentives for people to correct mistakes they've made in the past. Now, it has to be appropriate. It has to be the right case, the right treatment programs, and it has to be tailored to the individual in the case and the specifics that are presented. Along with diversionary programs, I'm a strong believer in specialized courts. I think we need a lot more mental health courts, for example. Those are courts where the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and the judge all have training in mental health issues so that they can create tailored programs of diversion and with mental health treatment to help treat the root causes that led the people to commit the crimes and to court in the first place. But I think there need to be consequences, and I think that those specialized courts can really help in tailoring those consequences to the individual in the crime.
Diversionary programs, in theory, are a wonderful idea, especially for first-time low-level drug offenders, for example, that have an issue, an addiction issue. Diversionary tactics are appropriate. However, diversionary tactics don't work for the violent and the mentally ill that are terrorizing all of us every single day. They're living on the streets and terrorizing each other. People are dying every single day in the streets of Los Angeles because there are diversion programs in place, but there's no teeth in those programs should the people fail to participate and seek the appropriate treatment. I bet many of you don't know that it takes an average of 14 to 17 times in drug rehab to finally be able to overcome an addiction. And part of the reason we have so many mentally ill on the streets now is because personal use of drugs and selling drugs under the current administration has been decriminalized to the point where all the addicts are living on the streets. There's no program in place to ensure that the addict that I was at in Mel's Diner before I came here for dinner tonight was getting any services for treatment. That's because of Mr. Gascon and Prop 47.
You know, it's really interesting when people blame the mental health epidemic that we have in our country on a particular DA. We emptied our mental health institutions many years ago, and we're paying the price of that. The reality is that we lack the continuity of care that we need for people that are mentally ill. And over again, when we try to criminalize mental health, we fail and will continue to fail. Unless we address this as a public health issue, we're all gonna have these conversations forever.
So since the late 1960s, California closed down all of its lockdown facilities unless you're criminally insane. About 10 years ago, we had a proposal to actually create 3,500 beds in Los Angeles County that would be a lockdown facility. That would be able to treat those who are mentally ill and violent. That is what I'm proposing. That's what I'm gonna advocate for when I become district attorney. Those 3,500 beds for 3 years. For 3 years, there has been absolute silence. This is probably the first time I think I've ever heard him talk about a secure facility for those who are mentally ill. I want the 3,500 beds. I don't want the 50 beds that currently exist in LA County. We have 50 beds right now of a county of 10 million people. That's outrageous. By the way, it's not 50 anymore, it's 45.
You know, the 3,500 beds that are being funded in the county is part of work that I have been doing with members of the board of supervisors, nonprofit organizations, and as part of the work that has been going on for years since I became the district attorney. So the reality is that I have talked about it, I will continue to talk about it because it is important that we get.
I know, but anyway, you're let you guys point. Okay. Right, he has not talked about this facility, because the last time it was discussed was about 10 years ago, when we were going to redo Men's Central Jail, rebuild it, and also include 3,500 beds for the mentally ill in a lockdown facility. That's what I'm talking about. That's what needs to be done, and he has never talked about that in his entire tenure as DA.
All right, the question was, is mental health diversion a good thing? And we all agree that it is a good thing, obviously. The problem is that we do not have a good mental health diversion program for the most violent criminals that have mental health issues. I oversee the stalking unit, I oversee arson and explosives. Most of our defendants have severe mental health issues and they are violent. So we cannot let them out into the streets. We cannot put them out into programs in the community to address their mental health issues. The only option that we have is state prison. And then their mental health issue is not being addressed. So I completely agree that we need secure housing, and I would urge all of you to support the governor's Proposition 1 that will provide billions of dollars for additional secure facilities and beds and treatment programs for those that are mentally ill and really need our help. Thank you very much.
As a judge, if you're an attorney practicing downtown, you know that I am very receptive to diversion for people suffering from mental illness. That is my record. I also have a record of making sure when the attorneys come into my courtroom with a plan, I oftentimes will tell those attorneys, no, this is not sufficiently treating this person to ensure the public safety. But I want to segue into the fact the tremendous amount of the mental illness that is fueling crime in Los Angeles is the result of prolonged drug abuse. And until we address addiction, this specter of mental health and the crime that it brings with it is going to continue to plague us. So what I'm going to do as district attorney is to focus on addiction, because people who are sober do not hurt other people.
Thank you. I told you at the beginning that I was raised by my sister, who raised me along with 4 children by herself. One of those children, her son, developed schizophrenia. And I was part of the household when that happened. I can tell you it's very difficult. It's a very sad disease. It is very hard on families. So of course I support mental health diversion. We're not going to punish mental illness out of people. We have to be compassionate and we have to use common sense when dealing with these cases. Now, having said that, we have a mental health diversion law that has gone way too far because it characterizes just about everything as a mental illness. In East LA, we had a case where a man left his beautiful 3 Black children, all girls, in a car with an iPad and a pot to piss in, while he went into the casino and gambled for hours. He was arrested, he was charged, he filed a mental health diversion motion and it was granted. We've got to use common sense in these situations. Thank you.
When we talk about mental health diversion, we leave out the victim, we leave out the survivor, we leave out the surviving family members, we leave out public safety. If you have a mental health issue, but you're hurting somebody, you're assaulting somebody, you're killing somebody, I'm running for district attorney. I'm gonna hold that person accountable and responsible for their crime and make sure that person doesn't do that again. But also we have to show empathy and compassion. But I'm gonna tell you this, we do have a mental health law that is not helping all of us. It's outpatient. We've had so many individuals who go into court, get released outpatient, they're not taking the drug they're supposed to take or the medicine, and then they go out and hurt other people and commit other crimes. So any type of mental health diversion, the first thing we need to take into consideration is public safety, the safety of all of us who are being impacted by this. Then we need to help the individuals through inpatient diversion. We need a state-of-the-art county jail that has inpatient diversion and inpatient drug and alcohol. Thank you.
So some elected officials and community members here in Santa Monica have been outspoken in opposition to the county's needs. Do you believe that this program, designed as a harm reduction strategy, has been effective in reducing the transmission of life-threatening viruses? Additionally, do you think that holding these exchanges has the effect of encouraging drug use in public spaces?
I think it's a really important, really hard question. I think for those grappling with addiction, I think we should offer them services. I think we need to offer rehabilitation services. And we need to make sure that they can have those opportunities to the fullest extent possible. Now, I think there's a reality there too. A reality that for a number of people, they're not going to take that opportunity. They're not going to go to the rehab that they desperately need. I think for those people, all should be a harm reduction strategy. I think it's the best we can do. I think the trade-offs aren't good, it's the reality. But I think a harm reduction strategy in that scenario is all we can do. And so that means a needle exchange program. Now, I think it's hard. I think there aren't good options, but I think that we should make sure that we limit the harm that is done. And I do think we can offer rehabilitation services. We can offer other services around the needle exchange programs, but I don't see a better option than needle exchange program.
Me that this is more of a public policy question than a law enforcement question. I'm not sure that the district attorney candidate should be even answering this question. But I think if you look historically, harm reduction programs have not been working. They've been an abject failure in San Francisco, where, may I remind you, we served 4 years now. That same brand of social/criminal justice here in Los Angeles. San Francisco is a mess and LA has become one. And there's one common thread. Sadly, harm reduction does not work because there's no enforcement mechanism to make that addict go and get that much needed drug treatment program. We have no ability to force them into treatment with any kind of consequence anymore. How many parents have lost children because of fentanyl overdoses? Lots. Do you ask that mother, that father, if harm reduction worked for their kid? How many more young people or drug addicts are we going to have to bury every year because of his policies on our streets? 350 beds? How about 75,000 beds for the mentally ill and the addicted?
A couple of nights ago, I was driving through the Parkland Park. Parkland Park has become a cesspool. It is our public spaces. We're using them on a day-to-day basis. But there is a way of dealing with these issues, and it is not through the criminal justice system. It is through our California care courts. I think the governor has proposed a good option that does not really involve the criminal justice system, that gets people mandatory treatment. And I also joined Ms. Ramirez in supporting the governor's Proposition 1, because I do think that we as in California and most of the United States, we are suffering badly. We're way behind our other industrialized partners in terms of how we deal with those who have drug issues and the mentally ill, and we need care facilities to deal with both. But I also say that we're going to take back our public spaces. We're going to make sure that parks are now safe for.
Thanks for all of this.
So to be honest with you, I don't know the statistics or the successes about a needle exchange problem, or program, excuse me. But it doesn't sit well with me, because how far have we come that we are facilitating the drug use of these individuals that are suffering? So it seems to me like the wrong approach. And the correct approach is to provide services for them to help them with their addiction. And when they are so severely impaired because of their drug addiction, then we need to step in and be bold, because it is a serious problem. And it is those laws like Governor Newsom is proposing that expands the use of mentally impaired to those that are so severely drug addicted that they need our help. So I would say we need to focus on those services and those programs and providing funding for those things, instead of accepting it as a way of life.
We should not be enablers for people who suffer from addiction. That's my bottom line. I work with the addicted. As I have indicated, I've been it for the last 12 years, 3 days a week on Skid Row. You will find me at the corner of 6th and San Pedro tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. working with people who are addicted. The last thing that they will tell you, these are people who are taking initial steps towards their sobriety. The last thing that they want is somebody offering them a clean needle and an opportunity to continue their addiction.
I think I'm in the majority here. I don't like the idea of the government aiding and abetting drug use. At the same time, to the extent that harm reduction includes more than just needle exchanges, if it includes, for example, test strips that will tell people whether there's dangerous fentanyl in the pill they bought or the cocaine they bought, then I think there's a use for that. That's going to save lives. I don't like the idea of it happening in open public spaces. I would encourage the LA County Health Department to lease a building where they can do their harm reduction inside. And it should also be coupled with education and outreach for treatment. Every time somebody comes in for the needle, they got to sit down and get a little counseling as well. That's how I think we have to do it. And to the extent that drug addicts won't show up at the needle site, we'll rent a trailer. But don't have this needle exchange exposed to our children and families.
I am 100% against open air drug markets. It's just go to Reed Park right over here in Santa Monica, or Tonga Park right over here in Santa Monica. They're right by a school. There's glass there, there's needles there, there's glass smoking devices there. There's so many people who walk their children to school over there who are impacted by this situation. It's unfair and it's unjust. There's no type of society where we allow people to take drugs. There's no type of society where we give people things that hurt them. What we should do is, we want to do something, give away Narcan. Let's teach our parents and let's teach our community how to use Narcan, how to save children, how to save lives. But open air drug markets do not work at all and are hurting our communities and are hurting the safety of our children. Thank you.
Well, I don't think the clubs we want to open air markets. I don't think any of us do. I think the question was, do we support what the law says today, that is safe needle exchange places? And I believe that is a matter of time and place. Safe needle exchanges have proven not only to save the life of those that are addicted to drugs, but they've also saved many other lives. They're avoiding the spread of diseases like HIV. They are providing protection to our entire community. Drug addiction is a reality. And we have to understand that simply criminalizing drug addicts didn't work in the 90s. It's not working today.
Yep.
And we have more drugs and more drug availability and more addiction in our prisons today than we do often on our streets. So we need to look for ways to understand how we can work with our population to try to get them out of their addiction. But we have to face the reality that safety for our entire community depends on this process.
Well, yes, the question first. So this is gonna be another hand raised question, it's a follow-up. So during DA Gascon's term in office, he survived multiple recall attempts. If at any point you supported one of those recall efforts, please raise your hand. In one sentence, and not 60 seconds, but just as briefly as you can, just describe your involvement with the campaign. Did you sign a letter? Did you go out and knock on doors? And what was your specific involvement with the campaign?
Me?
And we'll go down the line for the people who raised their hand, and then we'll come back to this after.
Well, as a sitting judge, I can't get involved, so I signed a petition.
I signed a recall, I helped raise money, I went door to door to get people to sign the recall, I went and talked to people, I educated people, I fought for victims of
On December 31st, 2020, just 3 weeks after Mr. Gascon was sworn into office, I stood on the steps of the Hall of Justice with victims. And I warned Los Angeles about the 9 directives he dropped on us that day. That started my advocacy over 2 different recalls. I made speeches. I went on television. I put my neck on the line for victims. And I was retaliated against by Mr. Gascon. And I'm hoping he gets up and takes 30 seconds. Why would he take one of the most successful trial lawyers in the history of the district attorney's office, by the way? In the 170-year history of the DA's office, I lost 1 felony case in my entire career. I won all my murder cases. I'm the only African-American lawyer in the major crimes division, which he still hasn't replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it is true that John is an outstanding lawyer. It is also true that we have many outstanding lawyers in our office. And part of career development is moving people around. And actually, John is not telling me. John is not telling you that he was promoted, and he was actually put to work with younger lawyers so that he could provide training for that.
Probably one of the only things that Judge Archuleta and I have in common.
City Judge.
I am precluded, and rightfully so, from getting involved in such things as, the, recall effort. So was my signature affixed to that paper, and did I send it in with my blessing? Yes, I did.
Next, I also signed petitions, I have people sign petitions, I stood at the market and had people sign petitions, I raised money, I submitted money, I did all of that, but. I did it after 8 months of trying to work with Mr. Gaston in his administration in trying to implement positive reform. And guess what? I was also a victim of his career development plan.
So I think in terms of everyone else in this, on this stage, I actually actively worked on the campaign to stop him from first being in the DA of LA County. And I did that because I knew what his policies would unleash. I didn't have to actually hear about his directives. He told us exactly what he was going to do. And I tried to tell the people of LA County what he was going to do and how he was going to do it and why he was the wrong person for the job from the very beginning. So I worked on the campaign against him when he first ran for DA, and I actively supported the recall, not immediately because he was just elected. I didn't wait until the first 3 weeks, but eventually I did see that his policies were failing, that we had to sue Mr. Gascon. In fact, I led the lawsuit against George Gascon because he was breaking the laws of the state of California. And not only is that from what I'm saying, that's what the Superior Court of California said, that's what the appellate court said, and soon that is what the California Supreme Court was saying.
You know, the policies that we implemented in the office were put together by experts, and actually they have all survived. They have all survived. And there is one policy, and it has to do with the obligation to allege a third strike, that the California Supreme Court has actually taken on because they clearly believe that there is a legitimate controversy in this. The Supreme Court doesn't take cases that they're going to affirm the lower court. So it's only one policy. It has been taken up by the California Supreme Court, and they have because they believe that there's merit in having a different conversation.
So, Mr. Chairman, why do you oppose the recall effort, and what's your theory to that?
As a federal prosecutor, I was barred from speaking out publicly on any of these issues. And I was focused on my job day to day as a violent crime prosecutor. Now I'm running against George Gascon because I think he's been ineffective and an incompetent leader of the district attorney's office, because I know I can do a much better job.
What did you guys
I also believe that recalls are extremely expensive. I think they generally target Democrats. I think they're a bad practice for the state of California.
Then, Mr. Gascon, okay, now we're gonna go back to Isabel's story for the next time.
Okay, back in 2014 and 2016, California voters passed propositions 47 and 57, which reduced many types of drug and petty theft crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. What, in your assessment, has been the effect of these propositions on public safety and the criminal justice system? And how, if at all, do you believe these laws should be amended or modified considering their impact?
Is it, am I up to bat again? Prop 47. The Safe Neighborhood and Schools Act. Does anybody for 1 minute believe that Prop 47 stands for the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act? I'd like to see a show of hands. Any hands? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You didn't one of the co-authors of this proclamation was? Do we need an educated guess? The winner. Bar, they won. Hey, nobody feels that we are safer because of Prop 47. It's not that it was a bad law, because it was passed by a vote of 60-40.
Right.
However, under the lack of leadership in the current district attorney, the law is being misapplied. Now, there are people up here that think it should be repealed. However, we can't start repealing laws because that is the job of the legislature. We are in the business of upholding the laws as they are on the books, whether it's the death penalty or it's Prop 47. Prop 57 has emptied the jails, and we've seen what's happened. All those people are living on your streets and mine.
Well, I believe that we should amend Prop 47 so that habitual offenders, people who chronically are shoplifting, things like that, they are prosecuted in a different way than someone who's a first time, second time offender. In terms of Prop 57, I believe in sentencing reform. I think sentencing reform is important. If you want to change the way that people are in prison, if you want to make sure that they can actually rehabilitate and strive to rehabilitate, you have to have sentencing reform. However, I think Prop 57 is a misguided way of getting to that sentencing reform. What I would do, and what I think Jerry Brown was trying to do with Prop 57, was he was trying to go back to an indeterminate sentencing law, and that's going to take a lot more than 30 seconds to explain. But it's a law that basically allows us to use sentences to rehabilitate people so that people have an incentive while they're in prison to be able to get out of prison.
With regard to Prop 47, I would strongly advocate for amendments to that law. It was created back in a time when we did not have as much of the problems that we do today with the smash and grabs and the thefts of houses and businesses. We have to adjust to that. And Prop 47 did not account for those recidivist offenders that kept repeating after time, committing crimes. And so I would advocate for amending that. And then as well as for Prop 57, I think we have to bring it up to the times today. And we have to amend those laws to ensure that we are addressing the problems that we have today in our society.
The greatest beneficiaries of Prop 47 are drug dealers and the drug cartels. Let me explain why. Because if the criminal justice system has no way to incentivize treatment, drug use will continue unchecked. And that is what has happened. As a judge, before Prop 47, what were the programs? They were flawed, but Prop DEJ, Prop 36, you were given a choice. You're going to do a little bit of custody time, or you're going to go into treatment. After Prop 47, the drug users understood no real jail time. I can get out immediately. Of course, today you're not even getting arrested. Your drug use will go uninterrupted. And we are making the cartels and the drug dealers rich on the backs of the addicted.
What he said. Yeah, Prop 47 has to be amended for two reasons. One, it took away our ability to prosecute repeated theft crimes more seriously. So that every theft crime under $950 is a straight misdemeanor, period. And that makes no sense. You wouldn't raise your child by giving your child the same punishment if they keep defying you over and over and over again. But more importantly, on the drug side, it reduced possession and use to misdemeanors. By doing that, it eviscerated the power of our drug courts, which up to that point was the only government response to hardcore drug addicted people. And that's why you see so many more drug addicted people on the streets today. And by the way, these are not your parents' drugs that they're taking. You know, these drugs that they're taking are laced with fentanyl. These opioids that they're taking, these synthetic opioids, are causing brain damage. So when we see these dual diagnosed people, both with mental illness and hardcore drug addiction, it's because in some ways, the drugs are causing the mental illness. Thank you.
Prop 47 needs to be amended or repealed. That's it, and period. And as district attorney, I would do everything in my power to do that. The threshold from 950 needs to be brought down to 400, and we do need drug court back. Drug court was actually a program that actually helped individuals who were addicted to drugs. It actually provided a hammer. If you were arrested if you were using drugs, you were brought into court, you were given this program. As you completed this program as rehabilitation, then your arrest was removed and your conviction was removed. Prop 47 got rid of that. It needs to be amended or repealed immediately. Prop 57 also needs to be amended. Did you know they were early releasing individuals who were committing sex trafficking? They were early releasing individuals who were committing rape by intoxication or rape by GHB. They put so many different crimes into Prop 57 as early release and released so many individuals who were violent individuals in our society. Both of those policies and both of those laws did one thing. They created more crime, and they need to be amended or repealed immediately. Thank you.
The year before Prop 47 passed in LA County, there was approximately 2,000 people that went through drug court, in a county of over 10 million people. And by the way, most of them continue to fail that process. Prop 47 passed in 2014, and crime continued to go down until 2020, when the pandemic came up and crime started to go up. The reality is that their study over studies have shown clearly and convincingly that Prop 47 has not increased crime. In fact, when you look at the $450 threshold, that was a 1982 threshold, and that was simply adjusted for inflation to $950. Most of the states around the nation, the misdemeanor threshold is nearly $1,000. In fact, Texas, Tennessee, many of those red states have higher thresholds in California.
Yep.
The reality is that we are going through an epidemic that has caused many problems and displacement that are not associated with Prop 47.
There's a lot of misinformation about Prop 47. As to the first component, the rising of the threshold from $400 to $950, here's the facts. 38 states have thresholds that are higher. Texas has a threshold that's 2,500. Linking the threshold to increasing crime is simply not true. Because 38 states have higher thresholds. Now, I do think we need to study and take a careful look at whether there needs to be increased penalties for repeat offenders. I think that's something that needs to be considered very carefully. But I don't believe that the threshold of 950 should be changed. Now, as to the other component of Prop 47, I don't believe that jailing drug users is the solution. I simply don't buy that. And I think that reform was appropriate. I also believe that Prop 57 was an appropriate reform. I think it appropriately gave people an opportunity for early release if they can prove that they deserve it. And I think that that's it.
Okay, and now just as a, I guess Mr. Sedell, for the next question, but just as a follow-up, just a simple hand raise question. So raise your hand if you believe that defendants should use state prison time for drug offenses. State prison time for drug offenses.
Many years ago.
If you're doing drugs, if you're getting people with fentanyl, yeah, you should go to state prison.
Personally, if you're eating drugs, you can have to go to state prison. If you're using drugs versus you, I think that we cannot afford to be saying the people that are addicted to drugs just simply because they're addicted.
You work in San Francisco.
Nobody wants to hear your opinion. We're trying to hear the candidates, please.
Okay, now Mr. Darrow, the next question.
What strategies, policies would you implement to balance the need for public space management with the compassionate treatment of the homeless population? I ask.
So what I would do is I would start using our California care courts having the DA's office engage in the California care courts. I don't think I've heard of time from the DA's office that can have us staff that. And I think if you ask deputy sheriffs, LAPD officers, or any officers from any department or the fire department, they would agree with you that we need to start engaging in with the homeless community and also with those who are mentally ill, so that we can actually provide treatments. And that's what California care courts will do. I also, again, I want to stress that we can use Prop 1, which the governor proposed, to actually give more services to the to homeless and to the mentally ill, so that we can actually give proper services to those communities. And that's what I would do in terms of protecting our public spaces. But I would also, in terms of protecting our public spaces, I would also start to use some of our quality of life crimes to help protect those spaces as well.
I think it is important as district attorney to provide our prosecutors with the knowledge and information they need to incorporate a plan for the homeless with the crimes that are committed. We need to work with our partners in LA County and the state to learn about the resources that are available to us. We have a mental health division that has sat dormant for the last 3 years without doing anything, without working with our partners in public health or with the state. We have to be knowledgeable and we have to get engaged so that we know what options are available to help our homeless population. And I think that Proposition 1 will go a long way with giving us those beds and those options for the homeless who are suffering from mental health and drug addiction. And we need to work together with the governor's office and with our state to make sure that we have options for those homeless individuals. Thank you.
A little naivete that I sense from the stage with respect to this last question. My work on Skid Row for the last 12 years has taught me that drug addiction is an incredibly difficult nut to crack. It is. If you don't understand the power of methamphetamine and fentanyl, if you don't understand just how good those drugs make a person whose life is too painful to live on a reality basis, then you are not even going to begin to touch what needs to be done to get people off the streets into long-term sobriety. I have worked with people year after year to get them into long-term sobriety. Relapse is a part of it. And you know, there's no quick fixes. Ladies and gentlemen, if there were quick fixes to homelessness and addiction, we would have gone there years ago. I understand that.
It was raining outside on my way here tonight, and I was reminded as I drove by some homeless people that 75,000 people will sleep on the streets of Los Angeles County tonight. 50,000 in the city of Los Angeles alone. We've been throwing a lot of money at this problem, yet homelessness grows year after year, a 9% increase over last year. Now, with regard to the question, we have to use common sense and compassion in how we deal with people who have no place to go. We're not going to criminalize sleeping on a bus bench. We're not going to criminalize somebody sleeping in a park if there is no other place for them to go. But homelessness also can't be a defense to other crimes like theft. If a person goes into a CVS and grabs all the cosmetics off the shelf and walks out, there's got to be a consequence for that. Now, the consequence is the rub. As district attorney, you got to be smart enough to use the law to leverage those people into situations where they can get the help that they need. And for us, it's not care courts, Eric. They don't take criminal referrals. It's a civil court. For us, it's the Office of Diversion and Reentry. I support it 100%, and it needs to be better funded.
The reason why I'm saying care courts is because a lot of these issues should not be dealt with in the criminal justice system. That's why. So, Mr. McKinney, I understand that they don't receive criminal referral. I'm perfectly aware of how our criminal justice system works. I also know when it doesn't work. And this is one of those areas where we actually need care courts. That's why Governor Newsom was correct in what he did. That's why he's also correct with Proposition 1. Thank you.
Well, the governor was correct in creating care courts, but care courts are civil courts. They take referrals from parents, from health providers, from first responders, for people with psychotic disorders. They are not going to be involved in taking any referrals from the criminal court or for people who just because they're homeless or people who commit crimes because they're homeless. We have the Office of Diversion and Reentry for that. That's what we need to support as prosecutors.
We have limited green space here in Los Angeles. Our children are entitled to that green space. All Angelenos are entitled to that green space. Our families are entitled to that green space. Our children and families are entitled to beaches. They're entitled to use the beaches. They're entitled to walk down the boardwalk. They're entitled to go to places. That's freedom. That's the freedom of all of us. And so those areas are the right of all of us, not one or two individuals, not 3 or 4 individuals. But I'm also a veteran. I was also raised poor. There's a lot of veterans who are homeless and they fought for our country. We need to help them. There's also children. There's a lot of children who are homeless here in Los Angeles. We need to help them as well. We need to help the foster care system. There's a lot of issues with the foster care system regarding being homeless. We need to do that as well. And so we need to show compassion for individuals. But I will tell you this, as DA, as running for DA, being homeless isn't a crime. But if you're homeless and you're committing indecent exposure, if you're homeless and you're defecating or urinating in front of businesses, if you're homeless and you're threatening or hurting individuals, we still need to hold you accountable and responsible for your crimes. Thank you.
Biggest reason why we have 75,000 people that are houseless in LA County is because there is a housing affordability problem. We are not, there's not enough affordable housing in our county, just like there's not enough affordable housing in the state today. Trying to criminalize the problem, we have been there, we've done that. Now we have seen an increase in houselessness. When people are houseless and they commit other crimes, they need to be held accountable accordingly, depending on what they have done. However, simply being houseless, simply being poor, it is not a crime, and it would be horribly wrong for us to continue to try to fix or think that we can fix that problem by criminalizing. A concrete box is not a home. A concrete box is not going to fix mental health, and we need to understand that and move forward in creating more homes.
I think there's no question that homelessness is the great crisis in our area. When I go out and speak to groups, the number one question I get is, what can the DA's office do about homelessness? And the reality is, we're not going to be able to prosecute our way out of our homelessness problem in the area. We need more temporary, we need more permanent. Now, what the DA's office can do is 3 things. First, be a leader in the discussion about homelessness. Be a leader at the table when people are talking about solutions for homelessness. Second, the DA's office can prosecute and hold people accountable when they violate the law. Encampments and around encampments. There can be consequences for people who violate the law. And third, the DA's office can be a leader when it comes to mental illness and how it intersects with the criminal justice system. The DA's office can help break the cycle that exists where people are in jail and then sent back to the streets, then offend again and go back to jail. Good mental health programs, rehabilitation can help break that cycle. Those are all concrete things the DA's office can do on day 1.
I can't believe the district attorney of Los Angeles is talking about the cost of housing when his job is the chief law enforcement officer for the county of Los Angeles. I have sat after being derided. I've been in the Edelman's Children's Court for the last 3.5 years. I was signing removal orders, at least 10 to 15 a week, of a woman that would go into labor and give birth to a positive tox screen for that baby with methamphetamine and fentanyl. That baby had to be hooked onto morphine IV drip as it was detoxing. It had to be on oxygen support because its little lungs were underdeveloped and couldn't breathe on its own. It had to have IV feeding tubes and oxygen in its nose because it was addicted to drugs when it was born. I don't want to prosecute the poor pregnant woman who's addicted to drugs. I want to prosecute the SOB that is selling drugs to that. In the children's court, because that is ground zero. I can't tell you how many women were giving birth in tents, and it wasn't because the housing crisis was too high. It was because they were allowed to continue to be addicted to drugs unabated.
Thank you. Okay. So this will be the last question before the closing statement. There's been a lot of discussion tonight on how the candidates would be different from George Gascon. Please tell us how you would run the DA's office differently from former LA County DA Jackie Lacey.
Well, that's a trick question. So I think that I would be different because I have now been through the district attorney's office as George Gascon as our district attorney. So that was one thing I think that happened that was a good thing. In other words, that we are now very aware of the fact that the district attorney's office is very much more complicated than it used to be. It used to be that the district attorney's office focused on the prosecution of crimes, and that is it. As district attorney, I would be different in that I would incorporate into a strong public safety plan reform that is more widespread and not just focused on one issue. Jackie Lacey made incredible efforts with mental health. She was probably not assisted with the DAs in the office that maybe were not ready to follow that. I will be different in that I will be a strong leader and ensure my DAs and the public and the community that I will put public safety first.
As a felony trial court judge, my major issue with Jackie Lacey was to allow trial attorneys to use certain enhancements to create ridiculously long sentences. I had a case in front of me where individual was involved with other gang members, never pulled the trigger on the gun. As soon as he jumps out of the car while the other two gang members were there firing at the police, he threw his gun into the gutter, ran. What did the district attorney in that case compel the court to do? Because they wouldn't drop any enhancements. I had to sentence that young man to 72 years to life. And that was a travesty because he didn't hurt anybody. That's, now, other than that, Jackie Lacey is a personal friend of mine. I work with her. I'm proud to acknowledge.
Jackie ran a fair and ethical office. And she was a good prosecutor, and she was an innovative prosecutor. She started the Conviction Integrity Unit, then called the Conviction Review Unit, that Mr. Gascon referred to earlier, which has been instrumental in correcting some of the errors that our office has made over the years, and that's a good thing. She started this whole collaborative court process by spearheading the first mental health court in Los Angeles County. It's kind of hard to beat Jackie Lacey, but one of the things that I will do is something no other district attorney has ever done. And that's widen the lane of the district attorney's office. We need to get the district attorney's office more involved in public outreach and education, intervention programs and mentorship programs for our young people, especially Black boys and Latino boys in 5th and 6th grade. Because those are the people who are most at risk in our community. We can reach them and there can be better outcomes for them. I know because I was one of them.
Jackie Lacey was a great district attorney, and she was even a better person. And so if she was here as DA, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't. I support her. I continue to support her. I think because through her election, she had a lot of tough times, and a lot of individuals were coming out and harassing her and rushing her on stage and attacking her and attacking her family. So the only thing I can say that could be different is that I was in the infantry. So I'm gonna run up and down this county. No one's gonna stop me. I'm gonna keep fighting hard. So I'm fighting for those two kids right there. And I'm fighting for my wife, the police officer, and I'm not gonna stop, no matter who wants to move me, no matter who wants to rush me, no matter who wants to do anything to me. I'm not leaving this county and I'm not leaving my home. I'm gonna stay and I'm gonna fight. But I fully support Jackie Lacey. She created the complex child abuse unit that I'm in. It's the only complex child abuse unit in the country. And so she has my support, she has my respect.
Well, I've known Jackie Lacey for many years. We worked together when I was in the LAPD, and she is a wonderful human being. But under her leadership and the leadership of her predecessor, our county became one of the most carceral counties in the country. And we have paid the cost of that over and over again. We put mentally ill people, mostly Black, on death row.
Right.
We prosecuted minors until Prop 57 passed, younger than 16, as adults at rates that no other county did. We looked the other way when there was excessive use of force by law enforcement, and we are paying the consequences of that. So as a person, I respect her greatly. The work that she did has taken us to where we are today, and that's why we're doing the work that we're doing.
Jackie Lacey had some terrific programs. Her work on mental illness was cutting edge. And it's too bad that a lot of those programs have been disbanded. I want to bring some of those programs back. Now, in terms of ways I'd be different than Jackie Lacey, I'd be more reluctant to apply things like strikes. I think strikes over time have been abused. I think they're used to increase sentences in ways that are often disproportionate and unfair. I want a careful review system that would likely lead to strikes being applied in only a very narrow set of cases. I also disagree, as you heard earlier, with Jackie Lacey's position on the death penalty. I would not apply the death penalty for the reasons I stated earlier. But those are two examples of places where I would disagree with Jackie Lacey's policies, as well as an example where I agree with her policy.
I have great respect for Jackie Lacey. The first week she was elected district attorney, she promoted me to grade 4, a trial lawyer, and that was the highest trial deputy status I could have in the office. I was very proud to receive that advancement in my career from Jackie. She was a pioneer in mental health treatment. However, I understand that there was a lot of criticism concerning her use of force policies. However, what I would do is I would take all the directives that Mr. Gold put in on day 1, his blanket policies where he removed and reversed all of her great works, and I would implement those. I would go through those with top staff, because I have them all here, and I would re-implement the previous policies of Jackie Lacey's administration. Because for him to come in and undermine the authority of the district attorney's office and undermine the credibility of the district attorney's office because of his personal ideology, that is unacceptable. And when I'm elected, I'm reinstituting the blanket policies that he has revoked.
George Gasco and Jackie Lacey prosecuted costs at relatively the same amount. The one difference between the two individuals is that Jackie Lacey actually did not prosecute police for political purposes like this district attorney did. I would do differently than both of them is that when a case is rejected by our Justice System Integrity Division, that is the unit that actually prosecutes police officers, I would go to the public and explain in a press conference, explain why our office did what it did. I'm not going to hide behind a press release. I'm not going to hide behind deputies and blame them for it. I'm going to actually take the bullet and explain to the public why we rejected the case. And I will never, ever file a case for political purposes like some other individuals.
No, in the last 20 years, there were 2 police officers prosecutor in this county for excessive use of force. There have been 15 since I became the district attorney. Because the law indicated that the officer had violated the law. We have hundreds of police shootings every year in this county, and most of them are lawful, and our men and women in uniform work under extremely difficult conditions. It would be completely unrealistic if I was going to have a press conference every time that we decline to prosecute a police officer. I would be accused. I would be accused of politicizing the justice.
Okay, so now we're gonna do closing statements, 1 minute each.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to all of us tonight. It's not an easy choice. I understand that. We've got a lot of good people who want to do a lot of good things for the county of Los Angeles. But I have served this county for 45 years. I was a high school teacher for 17 years in South Central Los Angeles. That has given me a unique perspective on what is necessary to direct young lives to achieve their potential and not make choices that cause them to end up in the criminal justice system. 11 years I was a prosecutor in the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. For the last several years of that career, I tried more murder cases than any other DA in the entire office. There's only one judge on this stage tonight who has served this county 18 years from the bench and has the perspective to make the hard calls. Who gets a second chance?
Thank you.
To be in prison. Thank you.
Santa Monica Democrats, thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to discuss these important issues with you. I'm asking you to support me. I'm different. There's never been a district attorney in the history of Los Angeles County with my profile, either personal or professional. What would it be like to have a district attorney who was that young kid at risk, growing up in a high crime environment without parents, facing a minefield of bad choices every day and navigating it with excellence, working his way through college on his own effort, going to one of the top law schools in the country, and then dedicating his entire professional life to public service. When the question is crime, how to best keep young people out of crime, who better to lead the district attorney's office into the future? Thank you.
I want to thank you all so much. I've been fighting for my community, for the safety of my community for 17 and a half years in the district attorney's office. And I served my country for 7 years in the United States Army. I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm an Angelino. And you're gonna get a ballot, it's gonna come in the mail, and you're gonna get it next year. And there's gonna be a lot of people running. I think there's 10, at least now running. There may be more. And I want you to look at that ballot when you get it. And just think about one thing. Who is that person on that list that is going to fight for you if you're a victim? Who is that person who's gonna fight for your child if your child's a victim? Who is that person who's gonna fight for your community and for your family members if they're victims? I'm gonna be that person. I'm running to be district attorney for all of you, and I'm fighting for public safety for all of you. Thank you.
In 2020, Democrats have spoke loud and clear in Allen County. We say we don't want to continue to seek the death penalty. We do not want the excesses of the years of mass incarceration that this office has engaged in.
Right.
We want to stop putting 16-year-olds in prison with 50-year-olds. We want to make sure that we protect good law enforcement, we hold law enforcement accountable. And we want to move into a different reality for the future and safety of our community. What happened in 2020 was not an accident. And what has occurred in the last 3 years, since December 7th of 2020, was a confirmation and affirmation of the reasons why I was voted into office. And I will urge you to consider very carefully, there are very good people behind me today. They will all take us back, one way or another, to what was like before 2020.
It's great to be here tonight. Thank you so much to the Santa Monica Democratic Park Club for hosting this. I think it was an important forum. I saw at the U.S. Attorney's Office a lot of chaos and dysfunction within the DA's office. I saw management that wasn't trusted within the office and wasn't trusted by law enforcement. That was one of the major reasons I decided to run for district attorney. Because I think the office needs a fresh start. It needs new leadership and new accountability, and that's what I'm running to provide. I hope this club will support me. I have terrific endorsements. I'm endorsed by the City Attorney of Los Angeles, Heidi Belson Soto, by Council Member Bob Blumenfield, by Congressman Mike Levin. They all think that this office needs a fresh start and new leadership. That's what I'm running to provide. Thank you all so much again.
Are we safer now than we were 3 years ago? I started in 1989 as a law clerk, and I'm about to make history. I've gone from being the law clerk, it's like David Geffen in the mailroom, right? I started as a law clerk, making photocopies and copy for the lawyers. I made it to the top grade court trial status in the office. I ran for a Superior Court judge with 11 candidates in the race. So the fact that there were 10 in this one, I'm not that worried. Okay, I'm not. I am undaunted. I've been a judge for 6 years in criminal and children dependency court. I am the most qualified, the most experienced, and frankly, the most electable. With all due respect to my colleagues up here, that's okay. If you look at the demographics of LA County, ma'am, and if you're familiar with the electoral statistics, you would also see that to be the truth. We are all here for one reason and one reason only, and that is because we are not as safe as we were 3 years ago. Thank you for your attention.
This election is about the future. I'm not asking to go to the past. I'm not asking to reinstitute the death penalty. No one's saying that we're gonna start charging 14 and 15-year-olds with in criminal court. No one's saying that. This is about the future. This is about securing good, sustainable, responsible reform by someone who actually knows this office. You can't just parachute in and try to pretend that you have all the solutions. You actually have to know how this office functions. You have to know how the law works in California. I am that candidate. We are going to bring us to the 21st century. The LADA's office is still running on DOS. We're gonna change that. We are going to actually make this office a 21st century office, a modern office, an office that functions. We are going to restore our levels of staffing from the 750 people that we have right now to the actual number of 1,100, which we should have. And
Thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. For the last 3 years, our office has been leaderless. We have not had a leader in 3 years. The morale in our office is at an all-time low. Attorneys and support staff are leaving, retiring, and leaving for other departments because they don't want to work for District Attorney George Gascon. And the chaos that is in our office is reflective of the chaos that exists out in the streets. Because we cannot do our basic function of keeping our community safe because of that chaos. And I am the only candidate here that has actually been in the office for 33 years and did not leave. I stayed here. I was a trial attorney. I worked my way all the way up to senior management, and I'm the only candidate here who was a trial attorney and has actually run the district attorney's office. So I can start on day one to make sure that you are all safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and now I don't want to hear even one boo, but I'd like to thank all the candidates for coming tonight. Very spirited and informative debate, and we're really glad everybody came. And remember that on January 31st, which is our next meeting, you'll be able to come back if you sign up as a member before then and vote on who the club should endorse. Also, on December 17th at Santa Monica Brewers, we're going to have our holiday party. And now,
what time?
anybody in LA County who's eligible to vote in the DA's race can join the club to vote in the DA's race. So we North for Santa Monica City Council, for example, you have to be a Santa Monica resident.
The recording of this,
It will be on YouTube tomorrow morning. Folks, we want to adjourn tonight in honor, and really for the entire year. In honor of the great healthcare activist, Adi Barkan, who dedicated his life to campaigning for Medicare for All while he was struggling with ALS. And he passed away last week at the age of 39. And despite his diagnosis, which came 6 months after his son was born, he managed to testify before Congress, interview Democratic presidential candidates, speak at the DNC. And even in 2018, I know Janine Schmidtman is watching at home on Zoom. She remembers when Adi Barkan was reaching out to the Democratic Club here to come speak to us in this room, and his diagnosis prevented him from being able to travel here. His story inspires all of us to our most progressive ideals of using your life story to enact important and meaningful policy change. And so to close out our club meetings for 2023, I wanted to adjourn in his memory. Thank you. See you next week.